The alarm siren blared across the metallic corridors of Station Veron 9, bouncing off the polished bulkheads with a shrill insistence that could make a human headache in under 30 seconds. Cale Draven, a wiry man with an impulsive streak that rivaled the reactor cores humming nearby, ducked under a suspended maintenance rail just as a small cargo drone collided with a wall and exploded in a shower of sparks. "Again?" he muttered, wiping a smear of oil from his cheek. His gaze flicked to the chaos around him. Dozens of alien researchers were scurrying, taking notes on blinking consoles, their multi-limbed forms contorted with excitement rather than panic. For the aliens, disaster was data. For Cale, it was personal. The station was supposed to host a demonstration of the new hyperalloy composites designed for interstellar travel, and Cale's contribution, a crude, hand-forged metal alloy he jokingly referred to as prehistoric grade, had been assigned to the same testing chamber as the sophisticated alien material. The irony was delicious, and apparently everyone else thought so too. "Primitive," one of the Xenotech engineers sneered, tentacles wriggling in amusement as they examined the glowing strip Cale had placed on the testing rig. "Do you even call this metal? On our worlds, this is scrap." Cale's lips twitched into a smile that barely hid his irritation. "Well," he said, leaning on the railing and crossing his arms, "if scrap survives the test, maybe your fancy alloy will look even more primitive." The alien engineer laughed, a sound that reminded Cale vaguely of a cat choking on water, and waved him off. "You'll see. Your little human trick won't survive a single pressure cycle. We've already calculated." Cale didn't listen. He had learned long ago that alien calculations were rarely indicative of reality when humans were involved. Their assumptions were elegant, neat, and almost always wrong. He had a feeling today would prove it. The first test began with a low hum that escalated into a roar, the chamber pressurizing to mimic a planet's core conditions. Cale's alloy sat in the middle of the test bed, glowing faintly as the energy surged around it. He could feel the heat radiating through the metal, see the way it warped under intense scrutiny, but it did not fail. Not yet. The aliens gasped as their alloys started to fracture, the seams splitting under the weight of the simulated gravity. Cale, for his part, leaned against the wall and whistled softly. "Careful," he called, his voice carrying over the din. "That stuff looks like it wants to cry." A young assistant hurried over, taking frantic notes and muttering to themselves in a language Cale didn't understand, but their expression said it all: confusion, alarm, and a hint of admiration. "You humans have some strange instincts," an older alien, presumably the project supervisor, said. Their voice vibrated slightly in the air, a low hum underlaid with authority. "You rely on something other than equations." Cale grinned. Humans had always been underestimated for that very reason. When others relied on perfect logic, humans thrived in chaos. Then the first real test came, the blast doors. They were enormous, thick sheets of reinforced alloy designed to contain catastrophic failures within the chamber. Cale watched as his alloy was carefully placed in the central test zone, surrounded by a lattice of energy conduits. "Ready the doors," someone ordered, and the massive metal barriers slid shut with a resonant clang that reverberated through Cale's chest. It was meant to be the death knell for his primitive creation. If it failed, it would shatter under the pressure, perhaps damaging the test chamber itself. The alien engineers were practically salivating at the thought. Cale, however, simply crossed his arms, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The air smelled faintly of ozone and burnt circuits, and his stomach did a little jump at the thrill of uncertainty. Seconds passed. Minutes. The machine hummed, pistons pumping, energy surging through the walls. Then, a sound that no one expected, metal bending, a sharp, explosive ping, and the first of the blast doors began to buckle. 1. 2. The alien engineers froze mid-note, tentacles stiffening as their prized allies' protective doors started to shudder and bow under forces they didn't predict. Cale's eyebrow rose. "Well, that's interesting," he muttered. He stepped closer, not out of bravery but out of curiosity. His alloy, primitive as it might have been, had absorbed and redistributed the immense stress of the chamber in ways that the alien designs had failed to anticipate. It glowed faintly with heat, humming in tune with the station itself. He could almost hear it thinking, adapting, surviving. The supervisor screeched something that Cale couldn't translate, a mixture of outrage and disbelief, and waved their arms wildly. Other engineers began pressing buttons frantically, trying to halt the test, but the doors, once thought unyielding, continued to bend and bow. Cale's heart raced. He had never been one to trust appearances, he trusted results. And the result was that his metal wasn't just surviving, it was thriving under conditions designed to annihilate it. Then came the unexpected. The doors began to crack, the edges splintering under pressures that should have been catastrophic. Sparks flew as mechanical joints snapped, and alarms shrieked louder than ever. Cale's hands itched to reach for a control panel, not to stop the chaos, but to study it. He had created something the aliens had dismissed, something they assumed would crumble instantly. And now, it was proving them spectacularly wrong. "What is it doing?" Someone finally gasped in broken galactic common, pointing at the shifting doors. "It shouldn't, it can't." Cale smirked. "I told you," he said quietly. "Equations are fine, but intuition doesn't lie." The metal groaned, bending in a slow, deliberate arc, and Cale realized something astonishing. His alloy, forged by human hands using nothing more than heat, pressure, and clever shaping, was actively adapting to the stress. It wasn't just passive. It was alive in a way the aliens couldn't comprehend, responding to the challenge before it, finding paths of least resistance while maintaining integrity. And Cale? He was grinning like a child in a candy store, utterly unconcerned with the chaos around him. This was the moment humans thrived for, unexpected, unpredictable, and utterly exhilarating. The stakes were clear: survive, impress, and maybe, just maybe, teach a few aliens that primitive was a term best not used lightly when humans were involved. As the first blast door began to buckle entirely, threatening to collapse under its own weight, Cale's mind raced ahead. He had been underestimated, mocked, and dismissed. Now, he had the chance to prove that humans weren't just capable of surviving advanced alien technology, they could surpass it. The station shuddered with the tension of impending disaster, the hum of machinery rising to a fever pitch, and Cale knew that the real challenge was only just beginning. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the heat and the pressure, he could feel the metal responding to him, almost as if it understood. This was not going to be a simple test. It was the start of a reckoning. The second blast door didn't fail all at once. It screamed first, a long tortured shriek of metal dragged beyond every tolerance rating stamped into its molecular structure, and that sound alone made half the observation deck go silent. Cale Draven felt it in his teeth, in the old scar along his knuckles, and in the instinctive grin that spread across his face before he could stop it. This was the sound of something being pushed past what it believed was possible. "Emergency containment breach imminent," the station AI announced, its calm synthetic voice at painful odds with the chaos unfolding. Alien engineers scattered, limbs flailing, data slates clattering to the floor as warning glyphs flooded every display in angry crimson. Cale didn't move. He leaned forward, palms braced against the transparent barrier, eyes locked on the chamber like a craftsman watching a blade being quenched. "That alloy is destabilizing the pressure gradients," the supervisor barked, mandibles snapping with agitation. "Shut it down! Cut power to the chamber!" Several technicians scrambled to comply, but the controls lagged, unresponsive under the cascading feedback loops Cale's metal was creating. His so-called primitive alloy wasn't resisting the stress anymore. It was redirecting it, channeling energy through microfractures and layered grain structures that no alien simulation had accounted for. The chamber's sensors couldn't interpret the readings because nothing in their databases behaved like this. Cale finally spoke. "If you cut the power now, the stored stress will rebound inward. You'll implode the chamber." The supervisor turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "You dare instruct us on our own systems?" Cale shrugged. "I built mine to fail safely. Did you?" That question hung heavier than the pressure inside the test chamber. The aliens prided themselves on precision, on perfect predictive models. Humans, on the other hand, assumed things would go wrong and planned accordingly. Kale's alloy wasn't pure or elegant. It was layered, uneven, forged through repeated heating and hammering that introduced controlled weaknesses. Those weaknesses were now acting like shock absorbers on a cosmic scale. The third blast door began to deform. Not crack. Deform. Its edges bowed outward, bolts shearing one by one as if the door itself were trying to escape the chamber. Alarms escalated into a shrill chorus. Kale's stomach tightened, not with fear, but with calculation. He could see the pattern now, the way the energy spiraled along the alloy's structure, dispersing force laterally instead of allowing catastrophic buildup. "Route the excess load into the auxiliary heat sinks," Kale said sharply. "And open the microvents along the dorsal spine." Slowly. "You are not authorized," the supervisor started. The fourth blast door shuddered. That was enough. "Do it," the supervisor snapped, terror finally overriding pride. The technicians complied, fingers flying across holographic panels. The station groaned as systems rerouted power and pressure in ways they were never meant to, but the collapse slowed. The alloy glowed brighter, a deep amber light pulsing rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Kale exhaled for the first time in minutes. "You built it to adapt," a young researcher whispered, all creeping into their voice. "Not to endure." Kale nodded. "Endurance is static. Adaptation is dynamic." The test chamber stabilized, barely. The third blast door was bent nearly in half, the second cracked wide enough to see the warped internal supports, and the first had completely failed, hanging at an angle like a broken jaw. The fourth door held, but only because the redirected stress had found new pathways. Silence fell, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. Then the supervisor rounded on Kale, fury simmering beneath shock. "Your material nearly destroyed this station." Kale met their gaze evenly. "Your test did. My material just survived it." That wasn't arrogance. It was fact. Before anyone could respond, the station lurched violently. Gravity fluctuated, throwing several aliens off balance. The eye spoke again, less calm this time. "Structural integrity compromised in sectors 12 through 14. Cause: unauthorized stress redistribution." Kale cursed under his breath. He'd focused on the chamber, not the downstream effects. His alloy had found new routes for the energy, and the station was paying the price. "We need to isolate it," the supervisor said. "Jettison the entire test module." Kale's head snapped around. "Absolutely not. You'd risk the station for a piece of metal?" "I'd risk the station if you throw it out," Kale shot back. "That alloy is currently acting like a keystone. Remove it suddenly and everything snaps back at once." The supervisor hesitated, mandibles clicking. "Then what do you propose, human?" Kale closed his eyes briefly, visualizing the internal structure he'd forged by hand, remembering every strike of the hammer, every adjustment made by instinct rather than equation. "We synchronize with it," he said. "Match its rhythm. Let it teach your systems how to breathe." That suggestion bordered on heresy. Machines followed commands. They didn't listen. But the station shuddered again, and pride lost another battle. Kale moved to the control console, fingers flying with a confidence born from a lifetime of improvisation. He adjusted oscillation frequencies, introduced deliberate microdelays, and fed imperfect data into systems designed for precision. The aliens watched in horror and fascination as he intentionally destabilized their algorithms. The alloy's glow softened. The stress readings leveled out. "It's responding," someone whispered. "Of course it is," Kale replied. "It always does." The fourth blast door creaked ominously but held. The station stabilized, alarms downgrading from catastrophic red to volatile amber. Kale stepped back, sweat cooling on his skin, heart pounding with exhilaration. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was proof. Proof that human ingenuity didn't come from superior technology, but from a refusal to accept rigid limits. Proof that something mocked as primitive could outperform the most advanced designs when reality stopped behaving politely. The alien stared at Kale differently now, not with amusement, but with wary respect. And deep in the chamber, his metal waited, still warm, still ready, as if it knew the hardest test had yet to come. The station went dark for half a second, and in that half-second Kale Draven knew the confrontation had finally arrived. Emergency lights snapped on, bathing the corridor in pulsing red as gravity wavered again, this time not as a fluctuation but as a warning. Somewhere deep within Station Veyron 9, containment fields failed one by one, and the alloy in the shattered test chamber answered with a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the deck plates and straight into Kale's bones. It wasn't screaming anymore. It was calling. Multiple system failures detected, the AI reported, its voice now clipped, stripped of neutrality. Core stabilizers offline. Structural collapse probability rising exponentially. Alien personnel scattered in panic, but this time Kale didn't stay behind the barrier. He was already moving, sprinting toward the chamber access hatch as if pulled by an invisible tether. Behind him, the supervisor shouted orders that no one fully obeyed. "Human, stop!" the supervisor barked, mandibles flared in alarm. "That chamber is no longer survivable." Kale didn't slow. "Neither is the station if I don't," he threw back. The access hatch resisted for half a second before he forced it open manually, the primitive lever mechanism grinding against warped metal. Inside, heat slammed into him like a physical wall. The air shimmered, heavy with ozone and burning insulation. The remains of the first blast door lay twisted on the floor, and the second hung partially fused to the wall like melted wax. At the center of it all stood the alloy. It no longer sat passively on the test rig. It had deformed upward, folding in on itself, channels glowing with molten light as energy flowed through it in deliberate patterns. Sensors dangled uselessly, fried beyond recovery. Alien logic had lost control here. This was raw physics now. Kale stepped closer, boots crunching on debris. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. "You did exactly what I asked?" he murmured to the metal, absurdly aware of how insane that would sound to anyone watching. "Too well." The station lurched violently, throwing him to one knee. Above him, the fourth blast door finally gave way with a thunderous crack, collapsing inward and sending a shockwave through the chamber. Kale barely rolled aside in time, the impact hurling fragments past him like shrapnel. From the observation deck, the aliens watched in stunned horror as the human remained inside. "He's going to die," someone whispered. "No," the supervisor said slowly, eyes fixed on the data streams still flickering across one remaining console. "He's synchronizing." Kale reached the alloy and placed his gloved hand against its surface. The heat should have burned him instantly, but the outer layers had cooled, redistributing thermal energy inward. He felt vibration, not pain. Rhythm. Like standing beside a massive engine tuned just right. "The problem," Kale said aloud, voice steady despite the chaos, "is that you're trying to do everything alone now." The alloy responded, its glow intensifying. The station shuddered again, harder than before. Hull plating groaned somewhere far above, and the AI's voice cut through the noise. "Warning! Station core breach imminent." Kale keyed his calm. "Supervisor. You still listening?" Static crackled, then the alien's voice answered. "You have seconds, human." "Explain." "Your station is rigid," Kale said. "Perfectly optimized. No slack. No forgiveness. My alloy introduced flexibility, but the rest of the system can't keep up. You need to let the station bend. That is not possible. It is if you stop fighting it." Another violent tremor nearly knocked Kale flat. He grabbed a support strut, teeth clenched. "Open the emergency mass dampening fields. All of them. Even the ones you never use." There was a pause too long. "That will destabilize orbital alignment," the supervisor said. Kale laughed, sharp and breathless. "You're already destabilized. This just gives you a chance to survive it." Silence. Then, reluctantly, "Fields opening." The effect was immediate. The pressure inside the chamber shifted, no longer spiking but rolling in waves. The alloy's glow pulsed in response, its internal channels realigning. Cale felt the vibration change under his palm, settling into a slower, deeper resonance. The station screamed, but it didn't break. From the observation deck, alien engineers stared in disbelief as impossible readings stabilized. Stress loads redistributed smoothly across the hull. Power fluctuations leveled out. The station wasn't rigid anymore. It was flexing. Inside the chamber, Cale staggered as the alloy suddenly surged upward, unfolding like a metallic flower. Energy arced between its layers, controlled, contained. For a terrifying moment, it looked like it might explode anyway. Then it didn't. The alloy collapsed inward, locking into a new configuration, shorter, denser, humming softly. The residual energy bled harmlessly into the dampening fields, dispersing throughout the station. Alarms died one by one. Cale dropped to a seated position, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his chin. He pulled his hand away, glove scorched but intact. "It always comes down to this," he muttered. "You either adapt, or you shatter." The chamber lights flickered back to white. Emergency systems stood down. Somewhere, the AI recalibrated its tone. Structural integrity stabilized. Station survival probability, 87%. The observation deck erupted, not in cheers, but in stunned silence. Cale pushed himself to his feet as the supervisor's voice echoed over the calm, quieter now. "Human, what did you create?" Cale looked at the alloy, no longer glowing, no longer threatening, just waiting. "Nothing special," he said. "Just something honest." Security teams rushed in moments later, weapons raised but uncertain. Cale raised his hands slowly, exhaustion finally catching up to him. No one fired. They didn't need to. Because everyone on that station now understood one undeniable truth: the greatest challenge they'd ever faced hadn't been overcome by superior technology or flawless equations. It had been survived because a human refused to believe that strength had to be perfect, and proved it by standing unbroken at the center of the storm. The station felt different after the alarm stopped, like a living thing that had survived a near-fatal injury and was still deciding whether to trust its own heartbeat. Cale Draven noticed it immediately as he walked the corridor under escort, boots echoing against bulkheads that now carried a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. Station Veyron 9 was no longer rigid and silent. It flexed, breathed, adapted, and that realization sent a quiet ripple of unease through every alien who felt it too. The alloy was gone from the test chamber, carefully transferred into a reinforced containment cradle that no one dared call a prison. Engineers surrounded it at a respectful distance, instruments recalibrated, eyes wary. The same beings who had laughed hours earlier now spoke in hushed tones, as if volume alone might offend the metal. Cale sat in the evaluation hall, forearms resting on the table, knuckles bandaged, posture relaxed in a way that made several officials deeply uncomfortable. Across from him, the supervisor studied a scrolling data projection, mandibles twitching with each line of updated analysis. "You understand," the supervisor said at last, "that this incident will be reviewed by 3 councils and at least 6 ethics committees." Cale smiled faintly. "As long as they invite me. I hate missing meetings about things I accidentally broke." That earned a few startled clicks, alien equivalents of laughter, perhaps. The supervisor didn't quite manage amusement, but the edge in their posture softened. "We mocked your material," they said. "We dismissed it because it lacked refinement. That was an error." Cale leaned back. "Humans have been called unrefined for a long time. Turns out that's not always a weakness." Outside the hall, news spread fast. Word that a human-made alloy had punched through multiple blast doors and nearly redefined station engineering traveled faster than official reports. Technicians from other sectors found excuses to pass by the containment lab. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to care while recording every detail. The alloy itself sat quietly, unassuming in its final form. No glow. No hum loud enough to alarm. Just layered metal, scarred, imperfect, and very much intact. When the council convened, it wasn't hostile. It was cautious. You propose, one counselor said, their crystalline body refracting light in slow, thoughtful patterns, that our future constructions incorporate intentional structural weaknesses. Cale nodded. I propose you incorporate controlled failure paths. Places where energy can go when things don't behave the way you expect. Expectation, another counselor murmured, has always been our strength. And sometimes, Cale replied, your blind spot. Silence followed, not offended but contemplative. The supervisor finally spoke. Your alloy did not simply survive stress. It taught our station how to survive it as well. Since synchronization, structural efficiency has increased by 12%. That drew a collective stir. 12%, Cale repeated softly. Not bad for scrap metal. Permission came sooner than anyone expected. A joint research initiative. Limited at first. Carefully monitored. Human intuition paired with alien precision. Cale was offered a permanent position, access to fabrication bays that made his old workshop look like a toy box. He surprised them by hesitating. I'll stay, he said slowly. But not as a miracle worker. This only works if you stop treating humans like anomalies and start treating us like collaborators. The supervisor inclined their head. Agreed. Days later, the repaired blast doors were reinstalled, not as identical replacements, but redesigned. Layered. Flexible. Ugly by alien standards. Cale ran his hand along one panel, feeling the subtle give beneath pressure. You learned, he murmured. The station never forgot either. Veyron 9 became a case study across multiple systems, not for its near destruction, but for what followed. Stations that bent instead of shattered. Ships that absorbed impact and kept flying. Designs that assumed things would go wrong, and planned for it. Humans earned a new reputation. Not reckless. Not primitive. Resilient. On his last evening before rotating off station, Cale stood by the viewport, watching a cargo vessel depart, its hull gleaming with traces of human-style layering. The supervisor joined him, standing in silence for a moment. You were mocked, the supervisor said quietly. Yet you did not respond with hostility. Cale shrugged. Mockery's cheap. Results are harder. The supervisor studied him. If we encounter another such impossible scenario, will humans always step into the center? Cale smiled, eyes reflecting distant stars. Probably. Someone has to. As he turned to leave, the station thrummed gently around him, stronger not because it was flawless, but because it had learned how not to be. And for the first time, the aliens of Veyron 9 understood the lesson humans had carried from fragile ships, cracked bones, and stubborn survival across the void. Perfection breaks. But imperfection, forged with intent, endures.